Okay, so this is the first tutorial I'm going to do on the skull. Just going to do a couple of tutorials because there's quite a lot to talk about. So the skull consists of 22 bones, not including the ossicles of the ear, and these bones are connected by sutures. So on this model you can see these lines here on the skull. These are sutures, which are immovable fibrous joints which connect these bones together. So the skull consists of the cranium and the mandible. So the mandible is this lower jawbone, and the cranium is the rest of the skull. So the cranium can be divided into an upper part and a lower part. This tutorial will just be on the upper part of the skull. So the upper part contains the brain, and it's referred to as the Calvaria. The lower part of the cranium is the facial skeleton, so all of this, and it's called the viscerocranium. So that will be my next tutorial. So you've got 6 bones which make up the Calvaria: the frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital, sphenoid and ethmoid bones. So 6 bones. So the frontal bone here, you can just about see the greater wing of the sphenoid here. Not just about, you can see the greater wing of the sphenoid here, but the rest of it's I'll show you in a bit. The parietal bone is this large bone, well, it's 2 bones. You've got 2 parietal bones on either side, which make up a lot of the side of the skull, and you've got 2 temporal bones on either side, and then the occipital bone. You can see the ethmoid bone making up the medial wall of the orbit on both sides. So those are the 6 bones that make up the Calvaria. First I'm going to talk about the frontal bone. So you can see this big bone here is the frontal bone, and it's separated from the parietal bone by this suture. So this is the frontal bone, all of this, and it makes up the upper margins of the orbit, laterally and medially. So just some things to point out. You can see these ridges here just above the orbit. Not so clear, but you can make them out. These arches here are called the superciliary arches, and they're more prominent in males than females. And this angle here is quite good because you can see this little depression where the superciliary arches meet. This is called the glabella. So that's the frontal bone. Next I'm just going to talk about the parietal bone, and you've got 2 parietal bones. So you've got 2 parietal bones and 2 temporal bones. The rest are single bones. So the occipital, frontal, sphenoid and ethmoid are single bones. Parietal bones are paired, and temporal bones are paired on either side. So this big parietal bone makes up a lot of the lateral wall of the skull. And you can see at the front it articulates via this suture with the frontal bone, and posteriorly it articulates via this suture with the occipital bone. Inferiorly it articulates with the temporal bone via this suture, and it also articulates with the greater wing of the sphenoid via this suture. So I'll just show you from the top what that looks like. So you can see this suture down the sagittal plane, so it's called the sagittal suture, and the 2 parietal bones articulate via that. So those are the parietal bones, big bones on the side of the skull. So the next bone I'm going to talk about are the temporal bones, which, as I showed you before and explained, are on both sides. So the temporal bones, this bone here. And there's quite a few things to point out on the temporal bones. You've got a squamous part, which makes up part of the lateral wall of the skull, and you've got a petrous part, which you can see inferiorly, and I'll show you that in a second. So the squamous part is just this flat bit. Squamous just means flat. You've got squamous cells, which are squashed flat cells. So this squamous part is the large flat bit, which forms the lateral wall of the cranium. And this articulates anteriorly with the greater wing of the sphenoid, and posteriorly with the parietal bone and the occipital bone down here. So just here you can see this process, which is called the mastoid process, and this is quite important because a few muscles attach here. Most notably the sternocleidomastoid has an attachment there. Just show you that. So you can see this big sternocleidomastoid attaches there, and you've got this muscle here, digastric muscle, and a couple others. So that's the mastoid process, and if you look from the back, you can see this little notch here, which is the mastoid notch. Also, you've got this process sticking out here, which is called the zygomatic process of the temporal bone, because this is the zygomatic bone and it sticks out towards that. Then you've got this hole here, which is the external acoustic meatus, this little hole there. So you've got the squamous part, the mastoid process, the zygomatic process, and this external acoustic opening meatus. So I'll just rotate this round so you can now see the petrous part of the skull. So the petrous part of the skull, well, if you just look at the temporal bone, you can see it runs all the way around here, and it's all of this bone here. So that's the mastoid process. We've also got this little pointy thing, which is the styloid process. So from the inferior view, from this inferior view, this is the petrous part of the temporal bone, and this houses the inner and middle ear. So just have a look at that rotating around. You can see exactly how the temporal bone works. So all this base of the temporal bone on the inferior aspect is the petrous part. The next bone I'm going to talk about is the sphenoid, and this bone confused me quite a bit when I was learning about it. So from this lateral view of the skull, you can see the greater wing here, and you can see the greater wing on either side, but you've only got one sphenoid bone. The sphenoid connects in the middle via body, which you can't see here. I'll show you in a second. So the sphenoid, in the middle, it's got the body, it's got the greater wings, which you can see laterally from outside the skull, and it's got two lesser wings, which I'll show you, and you can see them from inside the skull, and then it's got two pterygoid processes inferiorly, which point downwards. So what you need to know about the sphenoid is that it consists of a body, two greater wings, two lesser wings, and two pterygoid processes. So the best way to show you it is, again, if you follow it as I rotate the skull inferiorly, you can just keep an eye on the greater wing here, and as I rotate it round, you still see the greater wing here. So greater wing, rotating it round, and you can see this pointing downwards. These are the pterygoid processes, and you've got them on both sides. See here, the pterygoid processes sticking downwards. Greater wing, and then the pterygoid processes pointing downwards. So what you've got here, you've got a lateral plate of the pterygoid process and a medial plate of the pterygoid process, and this little hook thing that you can see is called the hamulus. And in between pterygoid processes, you've got the body, the body of the sphenoid, which I'll show you from an inside view.